I wanted to ask you about the men. I noticed that we kind of already touched on this, but men are not men anymore.
Mm.
You know, they don't. They're afraid of women. They're afraid of life. They can't speak up. When they're riding in the car with the woman, they sitting in the woman's seat and she's
I
driving,
noticed that a lot.
sitting in
Yeah.
his. And
Yeah.
when I drive up now and I see a man sitting in the woman's seat and the woman is driving, automatically I go, beta.
Yeah, I do. I do too. I don't know what it is, but every time I see some dude in the passenger seat,
Yeah.
it doesn't look right.
It doesn't look right, man, because
Mm.
it's not right. It's not normal.
Yeah,
What
I
would
think
it take
that,
to turn them around?
well, I think what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a lot of men alone, childless,
Yeah.
womanless in their 40s and 50s. And because you've got a whole generation of men who are, like you said, literally afraid to talk to women.
Yeah.
They spend their time online all day. They don't even know how to talk to people in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
So there's two options for a lot of these guys: hookup culture, so they can go get herpes or something with these apps, or be single. And I see it. A lot of male friends of mine in their late 30s are just they're just dipping out of the game. They're
Yeah.
not gay. They're just, I'm not. Nah, I'm
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
I've got all the free time I want. I've got all the money I want. Um, and there's more and more of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think you're going to have a kind of a reckoning here in the next 10 years where a lot of these guys end up, now they're 50 and now they're like, dang,
Yeah.
I'm alone.
It's sad
Um,
too, man,
yeah,
because the order of God is God in Christ, Christ in man, man over woman, and woman over children. And just as the man need Christ to be his example to lead him, women need men to lead them and to be that example, even in especially in the home with raising children and things like that. And by attacking men and destroying them in this matter, whether it's happening in the home or where, you're really setting the world up, the country up to be destroyed because men were created to lead and not to follow.
they well, and they also attack traditional femininity too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the use in the, I mean, there, I saw a chart once basically where like women were never happier than in the 50s and 60s staying at home and being a
Yes.
housewife.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, so I don't understand. You're going to end up, by the way, similarly with a whole generation of bitter, alone women
Yeah.
who are going to point the finger at everyone else and say, well, or you see all these career women who are like, oh man, boy, I've really got a great career, but I have no kids and I have no
Yeah.
family, I have nothing, and they're too old now.
Yeah. I
And
hear that a lot already, man. Yeah.
yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm there's a shocking amount of friends of mine in their late 30s and early 40s that are still single. They have good jobs, they have good earning jobs, no kids, no prospects, and it's just, it seems that when we look at the data and when people were really happy, I feel like these women are going to feel like they were lied to. They're
Yeah.
going to say, wait a minute, I thought
Yeah.
this is what I was supposed to want, but man, sure is kind of crappy going to work every day and,
That's right.
and having to, come home and also take care of stuff around the house. And it's just, I think there's going to be a pushback in the next generation to traditionalism and to where that will be uh looked upon fondly again too.
Yeah. I work with a lot of women in my nonprofit, and our primary purpose is to rebuild the family by rebuilding the man. But I
Mhm.
work with a lot of women. We have women's forums and things like that. And a lot of women are starting to wake up and they realize already they've been lied to. They thought
Mhm.
career was more important than being married and having a family. They thought having children and still going to work was more important. And now that they're waking up, they can't believe that they were blinded like that. And and now that they're waking up and coming to order, they love being wives. They love being at home with their children. They are not in competition with these crazy women that want to go out there and work and care about their ego more than they do their children.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that is linked to consumerism too. So
Yeah,
they told the women to go out and get a job. Why? So they could pay more taxes, so they can buy more stuff.
yeah,
You look at a lot of people in this country, most people live in a house that is probably too big for them.
Yes.
And they're driving in a car that is probably too expensive for them. And they have a cell phone that's too expensive for them. And so what does that do? That creates the need for two incomes.
Yeah.
Back then, you didn't have all this stuff where people were getting buried in debt. And now it's like they tricked us. They tricked the family to where, you know, it was a proud moment for me when I got to tell my wife she could retire.
Right on.
But up until that point, we both needed to work.
Yeah.
Because we both went to college and we both, had cars and we had a house that was 5 bedrooms and we had no kids. So we created all this debt that meant we both had to work. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm almost 40. I've done nothing with my life except for work and buy stuff.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are like that. So I think there needs to be a return to live within or even below your means and not to find happiness through stuff, but in the people around you.
Even with all the stuff and people around you and all that, like so-called friends and living in certain neighborhoods and doing it, you still don't have peace because stuff just brings you a momentary excitement for a moment. And after a while, you look at it and it's just stuff laying there on the table, right? With no meaning. And then you go out and buy something else to make yourself feel good, and that disappears as well.
Yeah, and it keeps happening quicker and quicker. So you have to buy more and buy more.
Yeah.
And I think that was, I don't get too much into the, or the theory of overarching evil, but it feels like that was on purpose.
Yes.
That they wanted to make people work so that they could buy more stuff, so they could pay more taxes. And people are, I would argue, less happy now than, I haven't been around as long as Israel, but people sure seemed a lot happier in the 90s.
They were, man.
Yeah.
100%.
Like race relations.
Yeah.
Race relations seem better in the 90s than they do now, 30 years later.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's just because of the way things are reported. Like, again,
I'm telling you, you're right about that. When I was growing up, man, in Alabama, on a plantation, it was much better than the race relations were much better than, it was so different than night and day. What is going on now? And they lie about those days. They tell you, oh, really bad. Black people were enslaved and they were under Jim Crow. The worst thing that ever happened to blacks other than abortion was the so-called civil rights movement. Were you aware of that? It was the worst thing that ever happened to blacks. It
Why
was
do you
worse
say that?
than slavery.
Why do you say that?
Because
I'm just educate me, yeah.
Because prior to the so-called civil rights movement, as I said earlier, black people thought for themselves. They did for themselves. They would never put another man over them, especially men. They would never have a physical leader. God was their leader. They would never depend on the government. I didn't even know the government existed until I moved to the inner cities. And so, but when the civil rights movement came along, they made up this crap about, oh, black people enslaved, black people this, and they made the blacks think that we are here to help you. We are here to save you from the white man. We are here to give you freedom, when it really was a socialist movement in order to control the blacks. And Martin Luther King and all those people set themselves up as the leaders of the blacks, and they sold the blacks to the Democratic Party for a government check. And it's just been downhill because blacks stopped thinking for themselves. They got into color. They started to blame. And they have not recovered from that. They've gotten worse.
Yeah, it sure seems. And again, I say this as a white guy who lives in the middle of the country. It is rare that I see anybody who is black. So I understand my, I'm not, but I'm an outsider. But it sure seems like it's time for some kind of change in that community. When you look at, and this is one of the most dangerous lines to go down, is statistics. And you look at who is hurting the black community more than anyone else. You start looking at stuff, they're hurting each other. Yeah. But no Black Lives Matter show up, nothing. And blacks are killing one another. They're killing children. They're robbing and raping and carrying on in their own communities. And instead of going down there and saying, hey, Black Lives Matter, they go to the white people because the white people have the money. And they say, Black Lives Matter, okay. Yeah, right. And nothing's gotten any better.
Right.
Chicago's still, I wouldn't go to Chicago anymore. I used to go there a lot in the early 2000s, but now, no
Yeah.
way.
I
Like,
won't
no
go to
way.
Ireland. I'm black.
Yeah. Well, that's for a different reason, probably. But I mean, I see this stuff. Like, I mean, how do you not? I see people going into these stores and just stealing stuff and
Yeah.
walking out. The lawlessness. Um, obviously it's just still, it comes down to individual decisions. Nobody's makes you commit crimes because you're poor. This is one of the
That's
biggest
right.
BS arguments I've ever heard. Um, that's just such a cop out. Oh, it's a poor community. There's so what? That doesn't
You're
that
right,
doesn't
man.
make you go stab people. That doesn't make you go rob people. That doesn't make you. It doesn't excuse it. It might be a factor,
When I was
but
growing up, man, you're so right. I lived in a tin roof house. When it would rain, you could hear the rain pounding on the tin top, right?
yeah,
And my bathroom was outdoors. We had an outdoor toilet. I worked the
okay, yeah,
cotton fields. I did those things. And not once did it ever occur to me to go steal something. You know, it just, so it's not true, man. Poverty doesn't cause you to steal. The lack of character causes that to happen.
yeah. I've seen plenty of really poor neighborhoods that were not robbing each other. You know, you
Right.
have some element to it. You know, you got one or two people who are trouble or whatever, but I lived in lower middle class neighborhoods my whole life, and people weren't breaking into each other's houses and stealing from them. It just wasn't
Right.
the case, you know.